When you plan a simple lakeside gathering with music, friends, and family, the last thing you expect is to deal with a power-hungry HOA Karen. But when she stormed onto my dock screeching about noise ordinances and unauthorized gatherings, I calmly handed her a document she should have read more carefully. She didn't know that not only was my party legal, it was federally authorized. Even worse for her, the signature at the bottom of that permit belonged to her very own boss. And when the cops showed up, she wasn't ready. Lake life and HOA nightmares. For years, my small lakeside cabin had been my sanctuary. Nestled right between the forest and Lake Iris, the property had been in my family for generations. It wasn't a mansion, and it wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and it came with 40 acres of land and full lake access. Perfect for barbecues, kayaking, or just a peaceful weekend away from the chaos of the city. Things were perfect until about a year ago when the HOA decided to expand. They redrew boundaries and somehow wrangled half the lakeside cabins into their jurisdiction, mine included. Just like that, I was suddenly subject to HOA newsletters, fines, and the worst part, Karen. Her real name was something else, maybe Deborah or Linda, but everyone in the neighborhood called her Karen. She was the self-proclaimed eyes and ears of the HOA board and walked around with a clipboard like it was a badge. HOA bylaws in one hand, cell phone ready to call the authorities in the other. Her backyard faced the same lake as mine, just 3 properties down, and she hated me from the moment I hosted my first bonfire. To her, my cabin was a noisy frat house. In reality, I was a 34-year-old environmental consultant who liked to play acoustic guitar by the water on weekends. No wild parties, no booze-fueled chaos. But Karen, she had a vendetta. She'd already fined me 3 times for inappropriate dock storage. I had 2 kayaks. Once for unsightly lawn objects, a firewood stack, and once, bizarrely, for unpermitted wildlife interaction. That last one was for feeding ducks. But none of those compared to the fiasco of the summer kickoff party. It was my annual tradition. Every June, I invited a couple dozen friends, some coworkers, and my cousins to the lake for a big barbecue. Lawn games, grilled ribs, music by the water, and a live acoustic set by a band I knew from college. We wrapped by 10 p.m. sharp, always respectful, always tidy, and this year I made it extra official. Why? Because I knew Karen was going to try something. So I didn't just notify the HOA, I went a step further. Since I worked for the Department of Environmental Resources and the lake was technically under federal water quality monitoring, I got a federal environmental outreach permit. It allowed me to hold an officially sanctioned public awareness event on protected natural resources. Guess what counted as one? Yep, my lake. And better yet, the regional director who signed off on the event was none other than Karen's boss. She worked as a junior clerk in the admin department of the same agency. Now that was delicious irony. The day of the party arrived with clear blue skies and perfect summer weather. My backyard was buzzing with activity. Grills were fired up, lawn chairs were out, and soft country music drifted over the lake. People were smiling, kids were tossing frisbees, and even the ducks waddled around as if they were in on the celebration. Then came the screech of golf cart tires on gravel. Karen. She zoomed onto my property like she was reenacting a police raid. Wearing her usual oversized sun hat and neon pink whistle lanyard, she marched right up to me, ignoring the 20 other guests watching her in stunned silence. "This is an unauthorized gathering," she barked, holding up her clipboard like a weapon. "You're violating HOA bylaws 4.3, 5.7, and possibly 8.2. I smiled. "Hi, Karen. Enjoying the weather?" She wasn't having it. "I want this entire crowd dispersed within 10 minutes or I will be contacting the sheriff and the HOA board." I calmly reached into my back pocket and unfolded a crisp document. "This gathering," I said, handing her the paper, "is fully authorized. See Section 3, Environmental Public Awareness Program." Signed off by Regional Director Samuel C. Grant. She stared at the paper, her mouth twitching. "Samuel C. Grant," I added helpfully, "is your boss, isn't he?" Now that got her. Her face went pale like I'd poured a cold bucket of lake water over her head. But she wasn't ready to give up. I'm still calling the police, she muttered, grabbing her phone and walking away. My guests stared. One guy whispered, "Dude, what is her problem?" "She doesn't like ducks," I said, shrugging. 15 minutes later, a county sheriff's SUV pulled into the driveway. Karen strutted up beside it like she'd personally summoned the cavalry. She crossed her arms and gave me the gotcha look. But what happened next? Well, that's where it really gets fun. The deputy stepped out, Deputy Hernandez, a local who'd been to my parties before. I waved. "Hey, Mark." "Hey, Alex," he said, smiling as he looked around. "Everything all right?" Before I could speak, Karen launched into her monologue. "This man is conducting a large, unauthorized event on HOA property. He's violating ordinances. This gathering is completely out of control, and I demand he be cited and shut down immediately." Mark turned to me. I handed him the same permit. He read it, nodded, and said, "Looks official. Samuel Grant signed it himself." Karen's jaw dropped. But this is HOA land." "No, ma'am," Mark said, shaking his head. "This is private property backed up to a federally monitored water body. If Mr. Alex here has a federal permit, your HOA rules don't apply." Karen looked like she'd just been hit by a glitter cannon. "But he's making noise. There are children running around." "It's a barbecue, not a riot," Mark said kindly. "Maybe you should head home." "But He gave her the look. Karen spun on her heel and stormed off, red-faced and defeated. The rest of the party went beautifully. People clapped when Karen left. Someone handed me a cold soda and said, "You need to frame that permit." I laughed. I already have a copy in the kitchen. But little did we know, Karen wasn't done just yet. Because the next morning I got a notice from the HOA saying I was being sued for reckless endangerment of property and willful disrespect of community leadership. That's right. She tried to drag me to court, and that's where things really exploded. The Monday after the lake party, I received an official letter from the HOA's legal representative. It wasn't just a complaint. It was a summons to the HOA court. The charges? Reckless endangerment of HOA property, willful non-compliance with HOA event approval protocols, and disrespect of HOA leadership. I nearly choked on my coffee. Karen was trying to make a federal permit look like a neighborhood crime. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday, held at the HOA's newly renovated community center, a building that looked like it had more cameras than the Pentagon. I arrived in a crisp blue button-down, carrying a binder filled with documents, emails, photos, permits, even an audio recording of Karen threatening to make an example out of me at the party. She was already there, sitting smugly at the long oak table beside 3 HOA board members and the HOA's part-time lawyer, some guy named Greg who also ran a local insurance office. Karen didn't even look at me. She just tapped her fingers together like she was preparing a victory speech. "Mr. Alex Turner," the board president began, "you're here today because several residents, namely Miss Karen Dalton, have raised serious concerns about your recent party violating HOA guidelines." I nodded. "Understood. May I present my defense?" Karen laughed. "He's going to waive his little guitar permit again." I smiled and set the federal permit on the table, 3 copies neatly tabbed. "This was issued by the Department of Environmental Resources," I said clearly, "authorizing me to host an educational, awareness-building event for community members on my private property next to a federally protected body of water." I paused for effect. "Signed and approved by Regional Director Samuel C. Grant, who I believe is Karen's direct boss." There was a silence. One board member actually raised their eyebrows and looked at Karen, whose color was draining like a leaky faucet. This doesn't change the fact," Karen stammered, "that he violated noise ordinances and held an unsafe event. There were dozens of people, children running loose. He could have caused a fire. What if someone had drowned?" "No one did," I said calmly. "And as for safety, Please see pages 4 through 6. I had first aid stations, lifeguard certified staff on site, and all guests signed liability waivers. I even hired security from your HOA's own vendor list. Their lawyer, Greg, flipped through the pages and looked a bit uncomfortable. Yes, this seems compliant with most safety standards. Karen slammed her palm on the table. He embarrassed me in front of the sheriff. He made a mockery of the HOA. I leaned forward. Karen, you embarrassed yourself when you tried to override a federal permit with your clipboard. The room went dead quiet. Finally, the board president cleared his throat.
I think we need a moment in private to review these documents.
They left Karen behind while they disappeared into a side office. She sat, frozen, trying to stay composed, but her hands were shaking. 10 minutes later, they returned.
We've reached a decision,
The board president said.
All charges against Mr. Turner are dismissed. In fact, given the thorough planning and compliance, we commend Mr. Turner for hosting a safe and responsible event.
Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon.
Furthermore,
The board continued.
we find that Ms. Dalton's actions, calling law enforcement without cause and threatening a permit holder, reflect poorly on this HOA.
And then came the final blow.
We will be issuing a formal warning to Ms. Dalton. If there is any future misuse of authority, we will recommend her removal from all HOA volunteer positions.
Boom. Karen's jaw dropped. Her reputation, her power trip, was collapsing right in front of her. I stood up, gathered my binder, and nodded politely to the board. Thank you for your time. As I turned to leave, I heard Karen hiss.
You think you've won?
I looked back and smiled. No, I know I did. Aftermath. Karen. Vanished. After that day, Karen disappeared from all HOA functions. She stopped walking around with her clipboard, stopped harassing neighbors about lawn height or recycling bins, and most noticeably, she stopped making eye contact with me entirely. Rumor had it she asked for a transfer at work, apparently being publicly schooled in a legal room using a permit her boss signed wasn't a good look. The community threw a small celebration a week later, not for the party, but for the fact that we could all enjoy our neighborhood again without fear of a Karen ambush. One neighbor brought me a little trophy. Most legendary HOA win. I still keep it next to the permit on my shelf. If stories like this make you cheer a little on the inside, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We've got more outrageous HOA tales, epic comebacks, and justice served cold. Thanks for watching, and remember, always keep the receipts.